on where we are kind of in the West and in California with regards to overall water supply. So I'm sure you've been hearing a whole lot on the news about the current drought that we are facing. We should be used to this by now, especially in Southern California. But this is just a graphic, a map of the Western US, and it kind of has a color scheme of intensity, trying to show the intensity of the drought. Obviously the darker reds, if you will, it's a little more intense. So you can see coming straight down from Oregon, Washington, all the way through the Central Valley, almost down to kind of almost LA, but Santa Barbara area. There's a pretty dark red strip there. So it's looking pretty dire up and down the whole West Coast. And just to note, the dark red, we call it D4, but it's called exceptional drought. That was a new category that the state implemented during the last drought because it's becoming so severe. So just to give you a little perspective that it's not just a standard drought that we're going through, it's a little significant. This is just a graphic, obviously, of California and some of the major reservoirs that provide what we call imported water, but a huge supply of water up and down the state. And what I want to note is, so you've got 6 reservoirs that are listed. The top 4, you look at the percentages, they look really, really low. And I'm sure you've seen pictures all over the place, and they are really low. But if you look at the quantity of water, there's still a significant amount of water there, but nowhere near where we've been in the past. And then I also want to highlight the bottom 2, Lake Matthews, Diamond Valley. For Southern California, we have all spent a long time investing and dedicating resources to making sure we have storage in place. So this is just a little graphic that shows that we're maybe a little better off at the current moment in terms of this drought. We'll see how long it goes and where things turn, but at the moment we're in a pretty good position. So there's a lot of statistics on here. Just want to highlight for Southern California in particular, in the metropolitan region, we have 2 main sources of imported water. One is from Northern California coming out of the Sierras, the snowpack. That is, we just heard from the state, I believe last week, a 0% allocation is what they're thinking of starting this water calendar year, if you will. From October through about April, the state does snowpack surveys every month and gives updates. This is the 2nd year in a row that it started out at a 0% allocation. So fingers crossed that it rains and we get a little more snow, but that's kind of what we're looking at right now. The second source is the Colorado River, and that's also in a significant long-term, probably 20+ year drought. And it actually dropped below historic levels this past year, triggering shortage or rationing contingency plan actions for the 7 states that take water out of the river. So that's a pretty big deal. It's never happened in history. And so everybody's working tirelessly to try and come up with some conservation type solutions to make sure we can weather this drought as best we can. The last bullet down here, I mentioned that Southern California is in a better position than other places across the state. I'm sure you've all seen that the governor put out a 15% voluntary water use reduction. And so we're all trying to achieve that. But most of the state has been in a state of emergency for quite some time, except for, as you can see, Riverside, San Bernardino, LA, Orange and Ventura counties, along with a couple others. So again, that has a lot to do with all the investments that we made in the past, and we have quite a bit of water stored. But I wouldn't be too surprised if the governor and his administration didn't decide to go to a mandatory reduction, but we'll see what happens. Just a little bit about what we're doing in our neck of the woods. We have actually developed what we call the Inland Empire Clean Water Partnership. And this is all about outreach and messaging. You know, the water industry is a little unique. It's kind of a patchwork. I always like to use that word because there's 100 different water districts with 100 different boards, and they all want to send out their own messaging, which is makes some sense. So this is a group for our Santa Ana watershed that has come together, and we're attempting to have kind of a unified outreach and messaging as we go through the drought. You can see the 3 key points. As I mentioned, we are prepared in Southern California. We're ready to go. We've done a lot of hard work, so hopefully it'll be a little easier for us. We know that all of you and customers have reduced and conserved as much as you can, so we just got to keep it up. And as the water industry, as the planners, we're going to continue to move forward with it. And hopefully we can have a joint messaging program so that everybody's on the same page. Lastly, just a little couple plugs here for Western in the region. Obviously, I don't need to tell you guys about Master Gardener's program. That's been going on for a long time, and it's phenomenal. We love the reach that you guys get in terms of numbers of customers and residential customers. Western, along with some of our neighboring agencies, we came up with a landscape style guide and a SoCal Yard Transformation Handbook. Some of you have probably already seen this, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but these are some really cool books that have been put together by some really smart experts in the field of landscaping. Give Lisa a shout if you need a copy of one of these. Western also just is going to launch kind of a pilot program. We're going to offer one of a kind, an online store that will offer free devices for our customers. And so you should be getting, if you're a Western customer, and I apologize if you're not, you should be getting something in the mail just to kind of outline exactly what you could get. And it's all free. We have a consultant on board that will manage everything on your behalf, but you can get shower heads and nozzles and sprinkler heads and stuff like that, all at the cost of Western. And then of course, all of our agencies have indoor and outdoor rebates that are funded either directly from our own budgets and or through Metropolitan Water District. Typically offers quite a bit of subsidy for a variety of products. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. At this point, I would like to introduce and invite Celeste to start screen sharing. And Celeste is a UCCE Master Gardener, and she is also the chair of the San Diego Regional Water District Control Board. Celeste?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. Let me get this ready and going. Good, there's my screen. And thank you, Ryan. So great to hear your voice again and hear what you're saying, because it's something that many people have been working towards, and Western's always been one of the most sophisticated leaders in water management historically for a long time. And that leadership continues both in the leadership on their board and with their staff. So that's a lot we have to celebrate. It makes us feeling, all the more secure about our water future. But we still have room to adapt. So let's get started. So at this point, I'd like you to please unmute yourself. This is a participatory part where we all got to pretend that we're in the 2nd grade and we're going to have a lot of fun. Ryan already broke the ice by getting us started, but this is a icebreaker that I like to start. Now, I did this yesterday, and I have to say, I'm really getting quite impressed with people because the numbers for the first time are being called in pretty close to accurate. So we'll see how well we do. This test is, how many gallons of water do you think it takes to produce an apple, for example? How many gallons of water did the grower put on the tree to irrigate to produce this apple? And so just shout out numbers. And when I
30.
hear the right number, I'll advance to the next question. What do you think?
500.
3,000.
500, that is a lot.
30.
10.
19. So it takes 19 gallons. And so you can imagine a gallon of water, a gallon of milk, and put water in it, and that's what it takes. So let's see the next one, close to our heart. 5 inches of wine, 5 ounces of wine. How much water to grow this wine, these wine grapes?
25.
30.
Not bad,
50.
32, pretty close. I know we're preaching to the choir with you all. You are already water sensitized. Moving along the group here, we have coffee. Now this is extra because it takes water to brew coffee as well. What do you think?
50.
50.
37. So the reason it's not 50 is coffee beans mostly are grown in tropical areas where it rains a lot.
Right.
Now, we do have quite a lot of coffee, strangely, being developed in California. So it's kind of a new boutique crop that we're seeing, and it has to be irrigated because guess what? We do not live in a tropical forest here. Next, we have orange juice. What do you think?
42.
5.
50.
I think you can see there's a pattern. We keep going up in the number of gallons. So 45 is right. Okay, one little egg.
50.
53 is right. So egg is protein, and all protein takes water to produce protein. Protein is very nutritious, but it needs to develop with the help of a lot of water. Next, we have a glass of milk. Now, what do cows eat? Cows eat alfalfa. Alfalfa is one of the most water thirsty plants. Cows produce the most milk with high protein alfalfa. So to get high protein alfalfa, you have to irrigate it at a pretty predictable way and not stress it. You stress it a little bit, but not a whole lot. So it's 63. So that's, you were getting up there. This is just 1 8-ounce glass of milk, 63 gallons of water. So let's change the way we consume water just a little bit from what we eat to what we wear. This is 100% cotton t-shirt. Cotton is a water guzzler. We used to grow a lot of cotton in California. We don't do that anymore because the water is just not available. What do you think it would take to make this?
120.
Yeah. Are you ready? 500.
Wow.
It's a biggie. Yeah. And this is kind of an example of how our farmers have changed, not just cultivation practices, which we'll see a little bit in our presentation, but also have changed what they grow to tailor it to things that are more drought tolerant and less water consumptive or less water intensive. And we as gardeners, as master gardeners and home gardeners, we need to do the same thing. So here's a hamburger. So you have your beef, which is protein. You have grain, cheese, lettuce. All of these things are grown in California. What do you think it takes to produce this one hamburger? Although it's kind of a big hamburger.
1,000.
200.
634.
Oh.
So we think about, you read in the paper about some consternation about farmers, quote unquote, exporting water that is located inside of almonds or represented by alfalfa to foreign countries. And so, some people think we shouldn't do that, although the laws completely allow that because they're putting water to beneficial use. But we also have to think about when water is imported to California in the form of goods. So here's the last one I have. It is a SUV. That is a foreign-made SUV. So this represents water that is imported to California. What do you think this takes?
1,000.
Do I hear another number? Do I hear a higher number?
5,000.
2,000.
39,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the manufacturing process takes a lot of water. The reality is we often think about water in terms of what we drink, how we brush our teeth, how we cook and clean and water our yards, but it's so much more. The bulk of the water that you as a living being interacts with comes in all these different forms. So we really need to expand our sense of water. And this is becoming, all the more keen as with climate change, we're seeing change in precipitation patterns, and we have to think differently about how we consume products and how we use water. So let's move on to a next slide. And brings us to our next kind of concern, the climate emergency. We used to call it climate change, but now the language is closer to climate emergency. And what we're finding, and this is not news to you because we're feeling this already, is precipitation patterns are really changing. In our area in Riverside County and the Inland Empire, the Santa Ana watershed, we used to enjoy about 11 to 13 storm events a year. Most of those came in a relatively short period of time, because we are a Mediterranean climate, which means our water comes in the winter. And by the way, I was going to start out by saying Happy New Year. It is a Happy New Water Year. October the 1st is the first day of the new water year. And we track that because we generally don't get a lot of storm events prior to October the 1st into our winter time. We do get a few tropical that come up from Mexico, from the Gulf of California, those kind of humid storms. But our first winter storm was the one we just had, and that was a classic one that came in from the Pacific, and that's the kind of storm events we will have for the rest of this water year. The difference is we used to be able to track 12 or 13, of which 3 or 4, maybe closer to 3 in my lifetime, were major storm events where we got most of our water. And then the balance were light storm events that you could even miss it almost. But what we're seeing now is this real concentration that instead of getting that many storm events, we may get 5 or 6 storm events, of which 2 or 3 might be significant storms and the rest easy to miss. So our water is concentrating into a shorter period of time. So what that means is, as water managers, we have to really think differently about how we capture and store water, because we are totally calibrated around capturing a snow melt in the state of California or storm events that we're accustomed to. But if that deal is off, and all of a sudden we're getting double the water, but only once or twice a year, it really changes how we organize our infrastructure. It also changes as we think as homeowners, how we manage our yards. So this is a big famous slide. You just saw it from Ryan. So he covered it very well. One thing I want to point out is, so we're, we live right down here, not as bad, actually. It's severe drought, but it's not as bad as exceptional drought, where we have the whole new category that Ryan talked about. But I want to point out 2 things. Our 2 external water sources is the Sierra Nevadas, they're here, that's in exceptional drought, and the Colorado River, also in exceptional drought. Now, like I said before, that you are the most sophisticated, you benefit from the most sophisticated water management. And everybody in our area thought 2 water sources, that's got to be a good deal. In addition to that, we have the Santa Ana watershed, Santa Ana Water River, and we have groundwater. So we were sitting very pretty. We had all of our eggs were not in one basket. We had like 4 baskets. Except nobody really expected that we would have extreme, exceptional drought in both of our 2 major water importation, which in Southern California represents about 60% of all the water. Now for Riverside, because we do have groundwater and the Santa Ana River, it's a smaller percentage, 40 to 50%, depending on the year. But anybody who talks about water looks at these. Now you can go to the US Drought Monitor and, just Google it and you'll get a daily update, which of course you can't live without. I added this slide because it affects home gardeners just like it affects agriculture. So this slide was designed for farmers who are doing production agriculture. You can see the Imperial Valley down here, the Great Central Valley. Both of these places feed the world. Here's the Salinas area over here. This is a new index, and it talks about how vulnerable these places are to climate change and our ability to produce food. And, here we are, this is where we live. So we are pretty close to normal in terms of our vulnerability. And that is because we have really smart water planners who have looked out for our areas. We have so much to be thankful there. And our climate is a little bit protected. But if you like to eat lettuce in the winter, look down here in Imperial Valley. So they're in high and very high. Look in the Central Valley where we get so much of our food. You see a lot of high and very high. But for us, we are feeling a little bit more secure in terms of how we grow things. When it gets warmer, plants need more water, human needs more water, and all living things need more water. And, a lot of people can debate climate change. I'm past that debate myself, but this is facts. From 1950 to the year 2000, they looked at nighttime temperatures. They picked the middle of the nighttime, because there would be less interference from thermal mass like asphalt, buildings, things that hold heat. So that's the truest temperature. So just looking at the lowest nighttime temperature, we've seen in our area a 2.3 degree increase in our low temperatures, 2.6 in other places, which is really pretty remarkable. Southern California, all of Southern California shows a pretty significant temperature increase. And the way this really affects us is if you start out with a warmer, low temperature in the middle of the night, and then when the sun comes up, it gets a running start on heat. So our daytime temperatures are significantly higher. And we can feel this. Last summer was the hottest summer we have any data for. The year before that was the hottest summer. And the year before that was the hottest summer. So it's just continuing to accelerate, which we see in this next slide. Well, there we go. This is global temperature. So, we're not in this alone. They did the same kind of thing from 1880, looking at historic data, to 2016. This is a NASA product. And not only is it going up, but you can see it accelerating. The pitch of the slope is increasing. So, I don't really see why there's a lot of debate about climate change or, global warming, or what I call the climate crisis now, because the data is there. And that has a big impact on how we garden, where we garden. There was a study that I cannot find. I'm still looking for it again because I lost it. Looking at what trees are appropriate in what counties in California. And what they showed was a shift in our traditional. So what we think of as, a very normal tree in Riverside, I think of magnolia. We have a lot of magnolia. But what struck me when I read this is magnolia is just not going to be happy and healthy in Riverside County moving forward. So everything is kind of shifting to a hotter environment. So Ryan talked about this, and I just want to point out one thing. This is where we are, and this is where you see all roads come to one place, or all canals and rivers kind of come to one place. Again, we are so fortunate that our foremothers and fathers, leaders in the water community, brought water to this area. So just this is the Colorado River Aqueduct that the Metropolitan Water District brings. It comes to our area. This is the state water project, very important source of water for us. It starts actually way up here in Redding. We're going to see some pictures again of Oroville dam way up here. It comes down as a river, continues here, goes into the delta, and it's picked up in a conveyance system out of the delta. So you've all read on the news about the delta is in crisis. It is in crisis. I can't say we're finding the solution. It's been going on for 20 years. It's a very complex, very stepped on now, artificially engineered delta, and they're really having a hard time figuring out how it's going to resolve. So that's our water system. The plumbing is how I like to think of it. You kind of always need to know what your plumbing is. To show you how this water gets in this state conveyance system, you can see all these rivers here. There's the Tuolumne, the Merced, the Sacramento comes from above, the San Joaquin, and they are all snow melt from the Sierras, and this is the Sierras. So when our snowpack goes down in this area, or when we see this area being abnormally hot and lacking in precipitation, that should make us afraid, even though we might be feeling not as vulnerable where we actually live, because this is where our water comes from. So let's go on to the snowpack. 60% of all of California's water comes from the snowpack in the Sierras. And this is John Anderson going and measuring it. He just retired. This process of measuring it this way with a probe has now been discontinued. It's been famous. They measured his whole, he's my age, just retired. His whole career has been going to specific locations and measuring the snowpack every single year. Since he stopped being a ski bum as a very young man. We now measure this with LIDAR, with eyes in the sky, with satellites, which is just as accurate. So you can see snow here, that's always a good sign. But there were places last year, or the year before last, when they went to measure and it was bare land, no snow at all. So this all impacts the water. So this is Lake Oroville. Lake Oroville is one of the largest dams in the nation. It is a huge dam in far northern California where it stores a lot of our water. This water comes to us. Now this is 2005. It's the good old days. Look at all those houseboats having a good time, plenty of water. They don't even have to be that close. It's great. This is it, April 2021. You know, you see how this bathtub ring exposed. This used to all be underwater. You don't see any houseboats. Why? They can't get there. The water is no longer connecting the ramp to the dam, so you just can't get in, and there's no water anyway to speak of. And then here is Lake Mead. Lake Mead is on the Colorado. It is the largest reservoir in the nation, and this is it in 2009, which actually was the good old days, looking kind of meager. It's been in a drought for a very long time. And here we go, looking at it March 31st of this year. These pictures were taken by Nancy Wright. She's my colleague. She's chair of the Colorado River Water Quality Control Board. So she's our neighbor in Riverside County, but she is focusing on the watershed that includes the Coachella area, Colorado River watershed. And she took these. They used to put their boat in someplace around here, and now it's all dirt. They can't do that anymore, so they can't put their boat in. Here's another picture as of August from outer space of that same Lake Mead, and it's really shriveled up. I mean, it's just a skinny worm of itself. You can see in this graph, this is just from 2000, how the lake reservoirs have gone down and continue to go down. Now, way back when, years and years ago, some very wise leaders on the Colorado, and the Colorado enjoys probably the most robust collaborative integrated approach of any of our river systems. It really has a wonderful legacy. But the leaders got together and said, hey, just in case, what if Lake Mead gets to a very low level, what will be our protocols? Let's figure that out now when we're not in crisis. What will we do? And a lot of people said, well, that'll never happen. And why should we plan for a disaster we don't even have? But they in fact did wisely. And they developed a whole series of protocols of what their response would be if, God forbid, the lake fell to a level that would require it. We are there now. Everybody agreed to these protocols, probably because they thought it would never, ever happen. So what would it, they didn't care. But in fact, it happened. We're at that low level. And what that means is the first move is starting next year, January 1st, Arizona will lose their allocation from Lake Mead. And then if it continues to drop, it continues to include other people. So this is a very serious thing. Now, what all the users on the Colorado decided to do is they voluntarily said, we want to blunt the most draconian impacts of this drought. So all of us will agree to save water as best we can to try to see if we could get past this crisis. And they all agreed to do that. So that's good. And I think that model is a good one for us in the Riverside also. Even though we are not suffering cutbacks today, the governor has asked us voluntarily to save 15%. And even though we are not ourselves in a crisis or an emergency today, since we all draw from common ponds of water, common pools of water, even though we have the riches of our own groundwater and Santa Ana River water, we should also try to save our resources as well, so that there'll be more for everyone. In our studies in the past, and this is a little bit dated now, there was some studies that said water was wasted in our area as high as 50% of our entire water budget. I think we've improved on that with the last drought. But there's no doubt in my mind, we are at least wasting 15%. I was at a friend's house for dinner last night in Temecula, right after we got a really good rain, and driving his street, looking for a place to park, 2 sprinkler systems were on. And, so that's just not necessary. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. You all are good stewards of water because you have a relationship with your gardens and you have a relationship with the water they need. But so many people, your neighbors and relatives, really rely on that automatic sprinkler system, and it goes off and they don't think twice about it. And we have really got to make a change on that. So how else does climate change impact us as gardeners? Well, as it gets warmer, that gives rise to more pests and more disease. Now, some things actually get better. If it's drier, we've had particularly low humidity, except for a few days, but generally our humidity was much lower this last season than what we would normally have. Your plants, without that humidity, some different kinds of blights and fungus go down. But since we're not getting the hard freezes, we haven't had enduring hard freezes that kill off so many of our pests naturally. They winter over somehow, and we see that. So it's something to watch out for. This is a site that we're still seeing the sprinklers. I just railed about it, I'm sorry to say. In our area, 60 to 80% of your total water budget goes to what we call turf, cool season turf. I am the enemy of cool season turf. I have no grass, and I laud all of you who have taken out your grass or really reduced it and put beautiful flowering things that feed the bees and the pollinators that we desperately need. Grass remains in the United States the largest cultivated crop, more irrigated and more fertilized than any other crop in the nation. And it feeds no one. In fact, it starves the pollinators because it doesn't flower, and it takes up habitat that used to be flowering things that would feed all of those people, all those pollinators. So this is where we can really make a difference. And this is the reason I joined Master Gardeners, is I believe Master Gardeners is the group that is going to be able to help Riverside County homeowners change their plant palette from grass to many more beautiful things. So these are my flowers. And the question is, how many gallons a week does it take to grow a rose bush? And I know many of you are muted, but if you could either just unmute for a moment and see what we think. Now, you are good at growing roses and other plants, I'm sure, but it's particularly confusing because some of our documents talk about inches. Some of our documents talk about gallons. Some of our documents talk about minutes, depending on the kind of emitter you have. So it is confusing. But let's just hear some feedback. What do you think? And tell it to me in the terms that you're used to, either inches, minutes, or gallons, or some other way.
2 gallons.
5 gallons.
Those are good responses. The work that I have figured out in where I live, now I live in Duluth, so it's Riverside County, but it's a little bit higher elevation than Riverside. I can stay within a budget of 2 to 4 gallons. 2 gallons or less, even sometimes if, I turn it off when there's rain. In the winter, up to 4 gallons max for my largest ones in the summertime, which is pretty stingy. And I have them on drippers, an emitter system that's a half a gallon per hour. And that's how I do it. And I have 2 emitters per plant. And I'm constantly interested in hearing more how other people are doing it. This has been working pretty well for me. I have sandy loam soil, lots of mulch, which I do my chipping in the fall and apply my mulch. It's probably not the best way of doing it, but it's the way I've started doing it. So my mulch is getting a little bit light there, but I mulch with my own chipping from my own property. So I'm that's what I do. So I say 2 to 4, and it's working for me. So we can also change the kinds of things that we grow to more natives. Janice announced the UC Botanical Garden sale and the Master Gardener sale. You can get wonderful plants at a great price that are right plant, right place, that are designed and are happy and easy to grow in our area. I have some of these native roses. They're not quite as showy, but they're pretty showy and very pretty, and I really recommend them. And they take a lot less water. I don't even put the 2 to 4 gallons. I water these by hose, not very often, just whenever I think they really need it in the middle of the summer. I do not water them at all starting October the 1st. Let me get my next slide. Is not wanting to advance. Why is that? Let me do it down here. There we go. So now, as part of our discussion, after hearing this, my question to you is, how will you garden differently? And as I recognize so many of your names, I kind of think that you guys are pretty perfect gardeners already. So I don't know how you're going to do it differently. I guess the main thing we can do is share the information, get the word out to other people to help them to garden differently. We'll open it up for discussion now. I'm going to end my slideshow and open it up for everyone for discussion.
Thank you, Celeste. I just thought of something we might want to add in the chat, which is the water usage. The WC, what is it, will calls?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to put that in chat because that will help people too, I think, in their plant choices, because they can just plug in the name and it will tell them how much that particular plant requires.
I use wool coal a lot. The only challenge I find for a lot of people is it's sorted by scientific name. So whenever you find a plant with a common name, just Google it and get the scientific name, and then you can find it in the wool coal volume quickly, because it is very comprehensive. I have never had a plant that I couldn't find in there. That's how comprehensive it is. But if you don't know the scientific name, you're going to kind of go blind looking down the list, because it's an encyclopedia, basically. I recommend reading that. I loved reading that. I was introduced to that by Tom Ash, who was a great botanist who passed away last year, or maybe earlier this year. Wait, when we were in 21, I think it was last year. And, you know, we just really are going to miss him forever. And he worked on that. He was one of the experts who worked on developing the wokel. It is a little, you know, less accessible as some other things. The documents that Western puts out are brilliant. Everyone should have those memorized. I mean, I think every master gardener should have 4 or 5 of those in their car or wherever they go and hand them out to everybody constantly. So I see we have some information in chat here. Can you address the issue of Mexico getting more water rations from the Colorado River? Well, historically, historically, since the development of the Colorado River, which naturally flows to Mexico, we interrupted that flow in the United States. Their treaty was not honored forever and ever. And I used to tell the story, I would fall asleep at night hearing my grandfather and uncles and father arguing about water deliveries because they were farming in Baja California, that's where they're from, and United States not honoring the treaty. Well, now United States honors the treaty. So they do give them their deliveries. And there's 2 big aspects to it. One is acre feet of water, and the other part is the quality of that water, because we started giving them the water that was required by the treaty, but we only gave them salty water. So then there had to be lawsuits about salty water, but now we give them good water like everybody else. So they're finally fulfilling the treaty. But the treaty was negotiated, I have to say, with a pretty heavy hand from the United States. And so in the cutoff protocols, Mexico gets cut off much earlier than I personally think they should, because naturally the river flowed to them. The terminus is in Mexico. So it doesn't seem right to drain the river, which we've done. We've diverted the river. It does not make it to the Gulf very often. So it does not make it to Mexico, which is an unnatural scheme. So the question was, is Mexico, getting greater allocations? And they're really not. They're going to be getting lesser allocations in the future if this drought continues. And those negotiations and discussions are already happening at this point. There's an International Border Water Commission. There's 2 sides of it. One's in the United States, one's in Mexico, and they help manage those discussions. And the Colorado River users are very much involved in it. And Mexico is at the table with the Colorado River users. So it's an international treaty. It's a very big deal. Does purchasing a hybrid help to offset the water quotient? That's a good question. I mean, we know that purchasing a hybrid or an all-electric vehicle certainly reduces emissions, and reducing emissions certainly helps with reducing climate change, or reducing the impact of those gases that cause climate change. So I think it's a good thing. But in terms of the lithium batteries, I mean, I've read some things that lithium batteries do take a lot of water. I'm sure they probably do, but I don't have anything more specific than that. I have a hybrid. It's getting quite old, and a few things are no longer working on it, like the cruise control, which I happen to like. And so I'm in the market, and I'm going to go with a full electric vehicle with my next move. If they ever get them available, there's a supply chain problem. So there's a waiting list, of course. Let me see. How do communities such as Beaumont justify building 1,000 new houses? Well, the interesting thing is the new houses are designed to use a lot less water than the old houses. All of the fixtures are designed to be water efficient. Not all the old houses have made those retrofits, although many of us have. All the new houses have substantially smaller yards than our traditional or houses I grew up in. So they justify it by saying, number one, people have to live somewhere. Number 2 is they're much more energy efficient, yes, but also much more water efficient. Many of them have gray water provisions on site. They come with some solar. We have to be sure our planning commissioners, make sure they don't forget about those goals. And I think for the most part, they do keep those goals front and center. And we've been pretty happy with the standards that the new homes have been meeting. Master Gardener plant sale. Oh, that's an announcement. Yes, please read that. That's very good that Janice puts in there. We also have a UC site. I really recommend everybody go there. It's like the funnest day to do that. And to get the SoCal Yard Transformation Handbook, that's just brilliant. That's really good. There's the plant list. Janice has the UC, the Wolcoles. Thanks, Janice. That is really fun. If you have some time, I think it's fun. You have to be kind of a garden nerd to really get into it. You probably all qualify. Can we get our properties resurveyed for water use? Since it was done originally, we've had 25 fruit trees. Now we have a rose garden and 8 raised beds. If you're in the Western Municipal Water District area, the answer is probably yes. Ryan, are you guys still doing the budget surveys? I don't know if I see Ryan, but it's his avatar. Or Lisa, maybe you can answer that question.
I'm sorry, what was it, Celeste?
Is Western still doing the surveys for the water budgets? Looking at the property in terms of plant composition? I know you used to go out and do that. I don't know if you still are doing it or not for the budget allocation.
Yeah, sorry for the delay there, Celeste. The answer is yes. We definitely have that service still available.
So they're really, really good. And, that's a very expensive for free survey that you can enjoy to get that calibration. Again, Western is one of the leaders of all of the West in terms of sophistication and the information that they're bringing and water security to their ratepayers. I live in the mountains. I pay my water bill to Rancho, California, but Western is my wholesaler. So I was really happy when I was looking at this house, knowing I was on the Western side for wholesalers. So I feel it gives me an extra, and I can see my view is our water tank. So I can actually see it. So that's good. I did have a party here and some of the board members were here and they said, oh, that's our water tank. I said, yeah, that's your water tank. And they said, well, we should landscape it and make it look prettier and obscure it. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. So Director Laura, I would like to see that landscaping. I don't know when it's going to happen.
I will make note of that.
That's okay. I'll maintain it. It'd be a joy. We have a question from Julie. Do you think that future water rationing in Riverside will differ for residents who grow fruit trees and vegetables or native low water versus their backyards? So this is a really interesting question that I am very sensitive to. Often we say, please cut back 15% or 25% last time, now 15%. They went to 15% because they're assuming you cut back before and some of those savings remains. So across the board, the governor says, please, can you cut back 15? And so he asks that of each and every one of us. And he doesn't know that the people on this call, for example, are already really carefully using their water drops and may not have any place to cut back because they're using the right plant in the right place for our community and they're watering it judiciously. So that's always the kind of fine tuning that is difficult. Now, Western system of their water budget rewards the people who have the right plant in the right place. That is baked in, and it is a very fair and sensitive rate system. I would say the best, absolutely the best. UC Riverside looked at it and declared it the best and said it was really appropriate and not regressive. So many rate systems penalize or shift some of their costs to poorer people who are using less water. They kind of front load the costs. And I really think that's unfair. Because when you go to our poorest neighborhoods, they don't have automatic sprinkler systems. They're carefully watching their pennies and watching their drops, and you don't see the runoff. You don't see the water waste in those neighborhoods. You see it in larger yards with automatic sprinkler systems that are hard to water grass, so there's a lot of waste. The thing I love about Western's rate system is it rewards that use. It really rewards if you're really careful. So there isn't a regressive or a disproportionate hit for poorer people who have smaller yards and are really careful with their water. It appropriately charges people for the water they use, and it's a pristine rate system. So you are rewarded for using low water plants and using water appropriately if you're on a Western rate system. Now, if you're in the city of Riverside rate system, that may be different. I'm less familiar with it. Last time I looked, it was not as fine-tuned as Western's was for Western's customers. Donald asks, how do you cool down a large yard without busting your water budget? Trees is the answer. Trees, the canopy. So a lot of people think a drought tolerant yard has to be rocks. No, that's the opposite.
No.
It is not rocks. It is beautiful biomass that is cooling and will protect against the heat island effect. And that is trees with a canopy. So, deep rooted trees, and you have to water them the right way. If you sprinkle them, all their roots will be hovering around 2 or 3 inches under the surface. And you really need those roots to go down so that they have a reservoir, and they may actually go down into the water table and you won't have to irrigate them at all. But deep rooted trees is what we need. And they are not water busters. They take more water in the very beginning if you're starting from scratch. You got to get past that point, and probably you don't want to plant a tree. We're in the middle of a bad drought, but fall is the right time to plant trees. That's the time that's perfect for us here. I don't recommend magnolias, which I know is a Riverside favorite, but we've kind of moved past that. I have a lot of sycamores and I have live coast oaks.
Huh.
And in the summertime, you walk under a canopy of these live coast oaks and you feel a temperature change. And they are, quite suited. Now, I'm lucky I've got space for it. If you have a regular backyard or front yard, you're probably not going to want to put a live coast oak because they just really grow. You might be able to put a sycamore, but I do recommend trees. We're on the same page for trees.
Absolutely.
And let me see, do I have any more questions? Did I miss some? Janice and Lisa put in tremendous resources here that I really recommend. You can save your chat by clicking on the 3 little dots on the far right of your chat, down where you would type in your question, and you'll see like a little happy face, and next to it 3 dots. If you click that, you can do save your chat. And then you can save those resources so that you can follow up on that.
Thank you for that tip, Celeste.
Yeah.
That's great. Does anyone, well, there is one more question.
Oh, okay. Oh,
native
native
grasses
grasses
for
for
lawn.
lawn substitute.
Right.
Good question. Very good question. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, what is going to be the function of this area? Do you have little kids playing on it? And I'm not against grass if somebody actually plays on it. I'm really for soccer fields, if people play on them, or baseball fields. I'm only against grass that the only person who walks on it is the person who mows it, which is usually the front yard. If the only person who walks on it is the person who mows on it, that should not be turf grass. But then ask yourself, what is it you do want? And there's a huge variety. You have to ask yourself, is this a northern exposure, southern exposure, eastern or western exposure? Because depending on sunlight, you'll have a different appropriate answer for that. There's many durable, low growing, pretty. Some of them really change colors. I have some creeping thyme in one area that's a very shady north part of my house. It's shaded by the house and by a tree, so it's shady. And so it's growing among pavers. So it's green sometimes and it's pink sometimes. So that's really a lot of fun. And that's appropriate for there. And also you can walk, you can step on the pavers and you step on it and it still springs back. If you have a slope, I really recommend something like rosemary. I do that a lot in my slopes. But if you have a dog that's going to play on it, you're going to want to pick something else. If you have, people need to walk over it, but not really play on it, you'll pick something else. So there's a huge variety. I just can't even begin to list them. But Bermuda grass is a no-no. Ryegrass is just incredibly water intensive. You just don't want to overseed with ryegrass. St. Augustine is a huge water guzzler. That used to be a go-to grass. But no, it's not appropriate anymore. So I would recommend you want to minimize your grass area to almost nothing, unless you have little kids who are kicking the ball around and really playing on it. And then you can pick a wide variety of things. My sister had little kids at one point. I mean, they grew up, but she put in fake grass. It looked beautiful from the patio, but it was kind of hot and I really don't recommend it. She's taken it out now. The kids are gone and she's putting, she has roses and like an herb garden and other things there that produce and she can interact with and are good pollinators and, it's a whole different thing. So it depends on what your needs are, what your exposure is, what, if you're north, west, east, south, things like that. And it looks like we've got another, Lisa put in a wonderful water.ca.gov, water basics. That's a great source. Anything else? Or Janice or Lisa, do you want to recommend grasses? In the SoCal transformation, I think there's recommendations for grasses in there as well.
And if they're looking specifically for native, I would go to the California Native Plant Society website and definitely ask about lawn replacements. They do have, I'm just looking it up right now, they do have lawns, alternatives to lawns.
Yes.
So that might be something that they could look at if they're looking for natives. I know there's that also diamante, which is that little silver and gray leaf. That has the little yellow flower. That I think that is in your Southern California lawn transformation book. So that's a good one as well.
And also the University of Riverside Turf Division is working to develop new turf grasses for our region. Very good site to keep an eye on.
They developed the first Bermuda hybrid. I mean, they've been developing grasses for 40 years. They've got a great experimental station there on grasses. I love this comment. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Absolutely true.
Exactly. Riverside is also doing something that you alluded to earlier, Celeste, which is the experimentation of what is considered more desert trees growing in our area in Riverside County. So I believe they have a mesquite, they have the desert museum desert. Yeah.
Palo Verde.
4 or 5 of different trees that they are doing experimentation with. And I think, bottom line, you mentioned the sycamore, but sycamore actually does take some water.
Well, UC Irvine did a big study. This is how I fell in love with sycamores. And traditionally, they are great they like water and they grow faster. But if you don't give them water, they live and they grow and they adapt. They're super versatile.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I have 8 huge sycamores that I do not water at all. So
excellent.
Are you near a riparian area?
Well, I call this my riparian habitat because originally it's by a stream that used to run when I had an avocado grove across the street from me that drained to it. Well, they took the avocados out and there's nothing there now, and it hasn't had water in it since that moment. So it no longer exists as a stream. It, you know, it is a rocky lined indentation, but no water since they're no longer flood irrigating the avocado grove that doesn't exist. So it used to be my riparian habitat. Now it's kind of a misnomer. But those trees are healthy and happy.
Yes,
and get
they
no water.
adjusted.
Okay, great.
Good to know.
Okay, are there any other questions, anyone? I think we are just about there. You know, there are water retention receptacles that we can look at for maybe a future workshop. Because someone here did ask a question about local vendors who sell cisterns.
There's a question in there about the citrus greening, if there's been an update.
I did
Oh.
answer him privately. that
Oh,
we'll
okay,
have one-
sorry.
Yeah, that we will have another workshop in 2 months. Is that correct, Lisa?
Yes, January.
January.
Nice.
Yeah, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's good. I'll tune into that. I keep looking. I'm so far safe.
I
And
know.
I'm worried. There's so many things to be worried about. Golden oak borer, shot borer.
Especially where you live.
I know
Yeah.
we're in an infestation. I just keep watching. I've lost a couple of trees.
Did you?
Yeah, and I took them down and mulched them and didn't, you know, kept them on my property. But it worries me.
Definitely. Okay, well, I think we pretty much come to the conclusion here.
Yes,
If there are no other questions, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And Lisa?
thank you all and have a wonderful day and weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you,
you,
Lisa and
Celeste.
Janice, for organizing it. Good to see you again, Ryan, and everybody else, and Director Laura, and great to see friendly faces again.
Yes, good to see you,
Thank you,
Celeste.
everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Ryan.
you.
Thank you.